Welcome to WBZ and CBSN Boston's continuing coverage of the Boston mayoral race. On September 14th, it's coming up soon. A nonpartisan preliminary election will narrow the field of candidates to two. WBZ TV and CBSN Boston are providing voters with a chance to directly compare the candidates' responses to four questions on issues you've said in poll after poll are most important to you. In this segment, we welcome Boston City Councilor Michelle Wu. Councilor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the city's housing crisis. Large infusions of public money and pressure on developers have helped but not yielded nearly enough affordable housing to meet demand. A Brookings Institution study released last fall identified as a major problem, quote, exclusionary zoning by affluent, mostly white communities, exacerbating racial and economic segregation in the region, limiting Black and Latino or Hispanic families' access to high opportunity communities, end quote. Well, it seems Chapter 40B, the state's affordable housing law aimed at mitigating exclusionary zoning, isn't getting the job done. What will you do as mayor to push suburban governments and Beacon Hill to help fix this problem?
This is absolutely a regional challenge, and I am already working with so many of our partners in government from outside Boston as well, proud of the support of many from around the region, because we've been doing the work on housing and transportation and climate that cross municipal boundaries. And the biggest role for Boston to play is to truly have a direct, bold, urgent vision that we should use every tool we have at the city level to invest in more affordable housing, to directly build and construct and renovate and integrate the redevelopment of affordable housing through city-owned property, through vacant land, and to ensure that we are streamlining our own processes, changing our zoning code to expedite and be more efficient when it comes to sometimes the years-long transaction and process that can occur that slows down the housing and drives up the cost of the process. And we also need to show that this is about the immediate here and now as well. Boston is not only in a crisis where we don't have enough supply of affordable housing units, we are facing, that also translates into a displacement crisis. And so we are facing a situation where families, particularly Black and brown, particularly families with children, all across the city are being pushed out. And so as we are increasing the supply of housing, doing all we can to partner with other municipalities and work on this as a region, Boston must also fight for the tools to stabilize our families and keep our residents in Boston while we're making this transition.
Does that include a toughening of Chapter 40B?
You know, 40B is one of the tools that honestly is applied in Boston proper. As we have our own zoning code, we have our own processes, we have our own mechanisms that generate affordable housing. Sometimes we hear the 121A and 121B provisions used more in our city, but we do need to set an example. Boston has been contributing our share of affordable housing and housing production. We need to continue ramping that up with the resources that we have, especially from the federal government in this moment, but to work hand in hand with our partner municipalities and make sure we're on the same page, because housing is also interconnected with transportation access, with resiliency, with jobs and access to economic opportunity. And so across all these lines, we should be partnering on a big picture vision for the region.
Okay, Councilor, this year, the city is spending millions of dollars on a marketing campaign to persuade outsiders that Boston is, quote, all-inclusive, an explicit effort to counter the city's nagging image as a racially unwelcoming environment. Does that message match the reality of life here for people of color? And if it doesn't, what do you intend to do about that beyond this ad campaign?
Boston is one of the most vibrant, diverse, energetic communities. We have expertise, we have activism, we have history, but we often see that that is very segregated across our neighborhoods. And so the goal of painting the story of our city through various ad campaigns, telling our story outside of the city, as well as internal efforts to make sure that we are creating spaces for communities to come together and to be reflected in every resource in every part of our city, that has to go hand in hand. I am someone who was not born in Boston, right? I'm among the group of folks who made their way to the city for college and stayed. But even today, in conversations I have with young people of color who had come to the city for school, there's often a repetition of the same conversations that we hear of, well, my family members told me, my friends told me, my neighbors told me, are you sure you want to go to Boston? Will you be welcomed there? Will you feel comfortable there? And so that is having huge impacts on our city as a city now in an increasingly fluid and mobile economy where people can choose to live anywhere they want and then zoom into many jobs. We have to be even more persistent about ensuring that Boston has everything that you can't get except in person: a thriving and welcoming arts and culture and restaurant scene, spaces for communities to gather and to be reflected, to be seen and welcomed in every part of our city. And that also requires not just the social aspects, but really tackling inequality and systemic racism through the policies that we need. I'm proud to have put forward many, many bold plans that were developed in partnership with communities, and especially to close our gaps across the city.
Last time we checked on the stats, Boston's METGO program, which buses more than 3,000 children of color to suburban schools, had a waiting list of 15,000 families. There are thousands more on waiting lists to get into the city's charter schools. These families obviously want an alternative to the conventional public schools. What, if anything, will you do for them as mayor?
I'm so excited to dig into the Boston Public Schools as the mayor of Boston. I have a lot of skin in the game here. I'm raising my two boys who are about to start first grade and pre-K in a few weeks in the Boston Public Schools. And in fact, this is my second round of being a mom in BPS, as I had raised my sister while my mom was struggling with serious mental illness through middle school and high school. So kind of doing it in a different order, but really having and living the stakes of what it means to be a BPS family and to know just how much those inequities that we see across our district map onto the daily stresses, anxieties, and efforts that our families have to put in to fight for a quality education for our young people. We are a city that is located among such resource. We are a mecca of education. We have jobs in the sectors that cities around the country would envy, but we need to do a better job of making those connections so that our young people in Boston Public Schools see themselves and are connected to the incredible universities that are here, are connected to and have the chance to intern at and to have vocational education connecting them to the jobs, not just of today, but of the future. And so I've laid out a pretty comprehensive schools plan that has 4 parts. First, that we must close the gap for early education, universal pre-K. We have to start early there. Second, a whole child, whole community approach where we are wrapping around every single young person from the moment they set foot in BPS all the way through with the resources outside of academics and school that city government can provide: housing, stability, food access, technology, emotional and mental health supports for family members, summer camps and activities outside the school day. We have all those resources. We need to make them accessible and streamlined for every family. And last but not least, 2 more, facilities to make sure that our older school buildings are fully updated and safe, healthy, energy efficient, but also full of opportunity for our young people. And then last but not least, vocational education to make sure that we are truly creating these pathways and strengthening our workforce.
In the short term, though, these thousands of families want out. What about creating more charter school seats?
I believe that we need to focus on the schools that accept all of our students, that often receive families with language barriers, who have experienced various disciplinary stresses as coming out of our charter schools and other settings. The Boston Public Schools welcomes everyone, and we need to make sure that the academic rigor, nurturing environment, supportive opportunity is available at each one of our public schools. We cannot tolerate a system where you have to walk a narrow tightrope for this lottery to work out or that wait list to rise up. Every single one of our school seats has to be ones that we are proud of for our own kids. And as a mom with kids in the Boston Public Schools who are young and who will be in our schools for a long time, I am going to fight to make sure that our school communities have access to everything that we have available here and have all of the environmental, academic, and community resources that they deserve.
All right, finally, let's turn to public safety. This year is the 25th anniversary of the birth of Boston's Operation Ceasefire, otherwise known as the Boston Miracle, an innovative effort to reverse an epidemic of deadly gun violence based on unprecedented cooperation between Boston police, federal, state, and county law enforcement, street workers, and clergy. For years, that was a national model. Then it fell apart. Do you understand why that happened? What will you do to fix it? Or do you prefer an alternative model to the Boston Miracle?
We know what works in Boston, which is that when we fund youth opportunity, when we engage stakeholders across all sectors and lean in, bringing clergy members and civic associations and nonprofits and those who are already doing the work in community into the conversation to follow and for city government to follow their lead, that leads to results, not just in public safety, but across the board. And in this particular case, I think it is important to point out as well that we saw tremendous declines in homicides and other major metrics of public safety. But we also need to make sure that how our police are interacting with community reinforces trust and isn't just concentrating the community interactions, whether you call it stop and frisk or call it field interrogation stops as Boston does. We need to ensure that we are truly connecting the entire ecosystem of public safety with public health. So much of the calls that come into our officers today are for situations that they may not feel best equipped to deal with, related to individuals living with mental illness or homelessness or substance use. And so I fully, wholeheartedly am eager to back and move a plan that includes public safety, targeting young people and creating opportunity and building these community coalitions, because we know that works. But it's not enough just to say, let's create opportunity and then enforce and bring down the hammer on those who are maybe outside the target area of those efforts. We need to ensure that we're also, in addition, transforming how we think about policing to be more inclusive of public health, to have accountability and transparency, and to truly reflect one part of an entire ecosystem where our families are stable in their housing, eager and comfortable with safe and healthy streets, have access to the resources in schools, are connected to transportation and jobs. This all fits together.
Just briefly to follow up, you were here when the Boston Miracle kind of came undone, the middle part of the first decade of this century, the late 2000s, I guess they're referred to. Do you have any sense of what happened and how we could avoid an unraveling again down the road?
There were resources that were put to ensuring we could place young people without hesitation or question in opportunities across the city. We still hear so many constituents talking fondly about the Red Shirts program that the city ran at that point, where through city jobs, internships with the Parks Department or Public Works or another department, all of our young people could have an experience in a professional environment, doing good for their community and getting the financial support, earning a living that their families needed over the summer as well. We need to expand that funding. And since that time, we've actually seen the eligibility for those youth summer jobs for the city shrink. Now, going from before age 14 and up, now to 15 to 18, we have to expand that. And it can't be just during the summer months, but all year round.
Councillor Wu, if people would like to find out more about your campaign and you as a person and public figure, how can they do that?
Please visit my website, which is michelleforboston.com, or come to any one of our events. We have 27 days to go and are running through the final stretch with events in every single neighborhood. Love to connect and very respectfully ask for everyone's vote.
Councillor, thank you, and thank you for watching. Please do explore this website, cbsboston.com further and click on our interviews with the other candidates, and most importantly, on September 14th, get out and vote in the preliminary election. Then watch your vote count with the combined resources of WBZ TV, CBSN Boston, and cbsboston.com. I'm John Keller. Thank you for watching.